very excited to be joined by Mike Hind, longtime coach. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you, Anthony?
Fantastic. So when you were growing up, where'd you grow up and how did sports kind of get started in your life?
Oh, man. I grew up in Port Coquitlam, born and bred, proud Port Coquitlamite. Hooked on to basketball, played all sports as a youth, but hooked on to basketball in about grade 7 or 8. Played through high school and just loved it. Just loved, went to my first BC High School Boys Championship in about what was it, 19, I guess it'd be 1975 down at the Coliseum. Got hooked on it there and just loved hoops from there on in.
And so when did you start playing and when did it start getting serious for you?
Oh, I started playing seriously in grade 9. I think I played in grade 8, didn't play in grade 9, then I hit a growth spurt and I played in grade 10, and that's where I got after it. And high school was serious for me, and then I took a little break after high school and ended up playing at Cap College for 3 years back in the day.
Nice. Well, what high school did you go to?
I went to Port Coquitlam High School, so I got there the year after Terry Fox graduated. So I remember the coach, Terry Fleming at the time, was still a friend, handed me a jersey, and it was Terry's number 4. He said, and this was before Terry, and at the time, Terry was like the first guy from Poco High to go on and play at the next level. So he was playing JV up at SFU, which was a big deal back then because they had some really good players on the JV team. And Terry was there, and Terry Fleming the coach handed me the jersey here. You got some big shoes to fill, and it was Terry's number 4 jersey. So I wore it, the first person to wear it after Terry graduated. And then I developed a bit of a friendship with Terry and the family, and ended up coaching Daryl in high school and Judith in high school. And I remember Terry telling me when he was going to run across the country, and I went, really? Really? Yeah, okay, good. And yeah, so lived all through that. And I remember him wanting to play one-on-one against me after he'd had the leg amputated, and he'd be in a wheelchair and I'd be able-bodied. And he said, yeah, you're going to stand and take a charge on me. Yeah, right. So some good memories back in Poco. It's a good community, and basketball was good. And this was, before they changed the name to Terry Fox High.
There you go. So you mentioned coaching. When did you get into coaching? After you played?
I actually got into it pretty early. Before I even right after high school, I started coaching a bit. So I took a year or two off after high school before I went back to college, try to find myself. And I coached at the high school there. Then I went to play at college. Then I ended up helping coach at Cap College for 2 or 3 years with the women's program there. We went to the Nationals, so I helped there. Then I went back to Terry Fox and helped coach the women's program there with Joanne Ward. We went to the provincials and had some pretty good players there. Ended up coaching at Fraser. I ended up coaching at Fraser Valley College at the time. I did 2 years out there. Got asked to take over the program out in Fraser Valley. They were 1-17 the year before, and they said, "Would you come out and help us out?" And I said, "Sure, I'll come out and do it." One of my first calls was to Bruce Langford, because Bruce was coaching out in the Valley at the time. I think he was at Mission. I can't be wrong. We played against each other when I was at Fox or at Poco High. And I said, "Bruce, I've just taken this job. Why don't you come join me? Come help coach." I said, we'll do this together and let's go see what we can do. So Bruce came and joined me and helped coach at Fraser Valley. Brought a few of his players with him, Ann Shook, Angie Logan. We were recruited like heck, and we turned the program around in 2 years. We were, I think we were 57-10, and ended up finished second in the country in our second year. So,
that's pretty good. Well, that's a turnaround.
Yeah, and it was great to work with Bruce, and then he catapulted that onto Heritage Park, and then he went on to SFU and done great things.
Yeah, no kidding. So you're coaching there. What happens after you're not there anymore?
Well, I was at I got on the board of Basketball BC at the time, so I was on the board of directors, and they just hired a new executive director, a fellow named Al Brown, a retired principal out of Ontario. And Al didn't know anybody out here. He comes out. They had a 2-person office at the time, and he says, "I need somebody to look up the basketball end of it because I don't know anybody. I don't know anything. So why don't you, apply for the job, quote unquote. And so I ended up being the technical director of basketball BC for a year. And so he says, then he comes to me and says, well, by the way, I'm going on a year-long trip across America with my new wife in an RV. Here's the keys to the house. You go ahead and run basketball BC. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. So
How
it's
old
kind
are
of,
you?
wing it. Pardon me?
How old are you at this time?
Oh, I'm just under 30 at the time.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, just under 30. And so I'm doing this, and he returned from his trip and said, oh, I'm done. And I applied, then I had to apply for the job, and I got the job, and I stayed at Basketball BC for like 18 years doing stuff there, and loved just about every minute of it.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a little bit. So obviously, that was a really big position at the time. It was Basketball BC was the central basketball point for the entire province. It was the dominant opportunity for kids to play. If it wasn't for Basketball BC stuff, you really didn't do much. So talk about what it was like setting up some infrastructure. What were some of the changes that happened, and then talk about a couple of the players that came through that were pretty important to the province.
Sure.
That was a lot of questions.
I'll try to rack my memory because I'm getting older here, so I think my memory's going. But John Mills, who a lot of people know from the basketball community, was the executive director of Basketball BC. He went on to be executive director of Sport BC, and then he went on to run the Olympic Oval in Calgary, and then Olympic Place in Calgary, and then the Richmond Oval. So John's been around, old UBC guy, still active in the sports scene. So John had set up a basic infrastructure. Al Brown, when he came in and when I helped out, we kind of built on that a bit. And then it was just me. Okay, so what do we do next? So we built the athlete development program up pretty quickly. It was already pretty good, and we had a great group of coaches at the time. You can imagine the names like Rich Goulet and Rich Chambers and Bob Corbett. Coach Allison McNeil did coach the provincial team for a while too. So we built up that program and did that for a while. And you're right, the provincial teams were very successful back in the time we were there. We won numerous national championships. The goal was always to win Canada Summer Games. That was a big deal because that's when all the provinces put their money into peaking for that 4-year cycle. And we hosted the Canada Summer Games up in Kamloops, and that's when Steve Nash played in that. There was some good players in that tournament, but we ended up winning some lots of national titles, and we swept the Canada Games one year, I think, or we swept national titles. So we were very successful for quite a run there. And then one day I got a phone call, the Grizzlies are coming to town. So we got involved in helping to promote the Grizzlies, the Drive for Five, to get 5,000 season ticket holders. We were involved in that. And I got a phone call one day from a fellow who says, hey, I want to build you a basketball facility. And I'm going like, yeah, okay, whatever, right? Sure. I'll be down to see you in a half hour. So a fella comes into my office. His name's Brent Curry. He's from West Vancouver. Turns out he's a very good businessman, and he owned this property out in Richmond. He says, yeah, I want to build a basketball building for you there. He already built the theater. I think the ice rinks were there. The Water Mania, the water building was being built, and he wanted to add to his little collection a basketball thing. Basketball was hot. And so we started talking, and we went through the process, and he says, yeah, no, I need to add the Grizzlies to the fold. Okay, so great. So we go, Brent and I remember going pitching to Stu Jackson, Arthur Griffith, and Noah Kroom. We knew they had no idea where they were going to practice, right? And so we went in and pitched, hey, Richmond, close to the airport, you can practice, get on the plane in 15 minutes, blah, 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 blah. And end up cutting a deal with them to make it their practice facility, which led to Basketball BC moving out there for 10 years as their main center, the basketball center. So that was pretty cool.
That was unbelievable. It was the first kind of big facility we had that wasn't a university site at the time, correct?
That's correct. We did lots of stuff out there. We did lots of championships. We did the coaching clinics we ran out there. We used to run like the super conference. We used to run big coaching clinics that I'm not sure they do anymore. But I mean, a couple of years there, we had 450 people come to it. And parlaying with the NBA, we were able to bring in some pretty good coaches, right? So PJ Carissimo is in coaching the Trailblazers. Will you do a clinic? Yeah, I'll come over and do an hour, you know, that sort of thing. So we did some really cool things there. During that time, that's when we recognized that there was a gap at the youth level. I'm talking younger kids, grades, you know, K to 7. It was kind of left elementary school at the time, and we said the Grizzlies and us talked about doing a junior Grizzly program. So that's where we started Junior Grizzlies. There was Junior Mavericks and the Junior Jazz. I think a couple NBA teams had it, so we modeled after that. We partnered with the Grizzlies. They became a financial partner, and we started running the Junior Grizzly program to get kids started in basketball. And we started that program. We had a great committee working on that, and I think Digby Lee was the president at the time and kind of helped drive that through. And then the Grizzlies announced after we get it started, get it going, the Grizzlies, they're leaving. So the first call, and it's funny that I think the day before they announced they're leaving, I was on the phone with Steve Nash's marketing guy, his agent's marketing guy. He says, if any opportunity comes up, you know, for Steve to get involved up there, he wants to get back, you know, let me know. They announced it. So that day I pick up the phone and call him and say, hey, I got an opportunity for you. So thus was born Steve Nash Youth Basketball way back in the day. So yeah, there were some really cool things at Basketball BC that we got started, and I think some of them are still going at different levels. We started the Regional Training Center concept, the Center for Performance. That was Mike McNeil was working with us at the time and doing a great job. And he says, I got this concept. What do you think? And he had it conceptually. I said, yeah, we can operationalize that. Here's how we'll do it, Mike. And so together we made that work, and that was a great thing for a while.
You know, when that started, it was a big deal. It was really cool that when you got all the best players in the province, they all came together, they all trained together. You got the best coaches, right? That was the big separator. You had all the top guys, all the top girls, everybody that was very, very, very good. They were all coaching and playing there, and that was kind of what made it special. It's not like that anymore, but it was at the time. It was great. I coached here for 5 years. Obviously, it was a fun time for sure.
Yeah, and we made sure we recruited the best coaches, right? We tried to get the best coaches and bring the best coaches in, and the model ended up going across the country, right? It ended up being replicated.
You guys were the first ones that did it?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, and it was again, it was Mike working for me and said, I think we can do this. He had a rough idea, so we sat down, we whiteboarded it, and then I did the financials on it, and we started going, okay, here's what we can do. Yeah, it was great. Mike made it run, and we got great coaching and made sure we brought in young coaches to keep them going and get them experience, and the players were getting exposure. So it started it, and obviously it's grown in different areas since then, but that was one of the things we did. We started the Basketball BC Hall of Fame at the time too. That was something I started. One of our former directors, Rick Enrick, said, I always had this idea about doing a Hall of Fame, but never could get it off the ground. I said, okay, let me look at it. Did some research, came up with some parameters, and we started that. And that's been I think it's important to recognize our past and recognize people who have given stuff to us, right?
Absolutely.
And that's been that was a fun project, because I really like recognizing people who've done things in the past. So we've done a great job, and been some memorable moments in those various banquets. And you've been to a few of them. I went to a few, and well, obviously I was running them, and there's been some pretty good memorable moments in those things too. So
absolutely.
There's something so that's the Basketball BC side of it. And
let's transition from Basketball BC into high school boys basketball championships. So I know you've been a big part of that tournament for several years. When did you get started with it, and kind of talk about the evolution of the tournament?
Okay, and I'll talk about the girls tournament too, because I played a role in that. So the boys tournament, I was working at Basketball BC, and our board chair at the time, John Buis, said he was running the high school boys. The AAA tournament, the Agrodome, or I guess it was AAA back then, yeah. And he said, why don't you come on and be assistant tournament director for that and help me out and, get going. So I did that for about 10 years, I think. And then they made the switch to the 4 tiers. And they said, well, we want you to run the 3A tournament. And something new, it's a brand new tier. We want somebody in there who's got some experience, and just run with it. So for the past 7 years, I've managed to be the tournament director for that. Got a good little team of people. They've been there with Jerry Mullis and Greg Leno and myself. We've all done it together, and for 7 years, we've done the AAA tournament as it's evolved to Langley Event Center, and been involved in that. And it's a great week out there at Langley, as you know. All the teams are in one place, so that's been a lot of fun, and just keep that going.
Yeah, it's kind of cool because the BC, the provincial championships, kind of holds more weight than anywhere else in our country, and it's because of the people that have been running it for so long. The Tim Winslates and how they got started with it. It's just I hope that we can keep it the way that it is for a lot longer. We'll see what ends up happening there.
Yeah, and give lots of credit to the Langley Event Center. Jason Winslade, obviously, long heritage in the game with his dad, and it was his kind of brainchild. And we got a good group of people who get together. We used to meet like 4 or 5 times before the tournament. Now we're down to meeting one time. Oh yeah, we know what we're doing. We got it. Boom, let's go do it. And now that the girls have moved out there too, as you've been involved in that, you've been in the forefront of that. I remember the high school girls tournament, like when I started basketball BC, I think it was 92 or 93. The tournament was always held in high schools throughout the province. It rotated. So it was held at Steveston High School, the old Steveston High School. And if you're ever in that gym, it was a small gym.
Yeah.
And I remember reading, I wanted to go to the final and then not going and I'm reading like 700 people got turned away. And like, wow, if the gym was packed, it could only probably hold, shoehorn in there, maybe 600-700 people. But people got turned away. So I phoned up Cindy Thompson from Maple Ridge, who was the president and who I'd coached against for years when I was at Poco High, and Terry Fox said, we got to do something different here. This is wrong. People are getting turned. We can't expose our game to enough people. So we pitched the idea of a trial of a permanent site at Cap College. So it was Cindy and I. It was me driving the bus and Cindy supporting it. And together we pitched this tournament at Cap College. Try it for a year, see how it works out. And we got a committee together. And I remember Doug Woodward was on it, Allison McNeil, Sandy Ferguson, a whole bunch of people I brought together. Some of them I knew, some of them I didn't, and just said, let's do this. And I remember meeting up at Simon Fraser one night. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Let's figure this out. It went really well. And it stayed at Cap for, I don't know how many years. I think I did it for 7, and then I turned it over to Les Hamaguchi and the crew there. And some of the people, it became a family, and some of the people did it for right through the whole time. It was quite amazing.
A great spot to hold the tournament. Actually, it was awesome. It was a really cool. It wasn't too big. It was kind of, you had the right draw. You could actually fill the place up. It was a good time. It was nice. I actually miss it there. Langley, obviously, is a really cool spot, but Cap had a cool history there too. So now let's go back to coaching now. So you started coaching when you were still playing, and then you've had some very good teams over the years. Give us a little rundown of where you were coaching and what it was like, and kind of, when you're at Fox, it seems like it's more of a fraternity of coaches, and kind of talk about that aspect of it, because there's quite a bit of people that actually take it very seriously there.
Well, yeah, no, I coached helped co-coach the girls program at Poco High back then, and we were pretty good back in the mid 90s. We did. We had Renee Sherwinski went on and played at UNLV and Leonard down there. She was a good player. We had Glenda Knight played at Cap, and we had a couple other players. So we had some good programs there. Then I ended up helping with Don Van Oss and Rich Chambers on the guys program. And we had some success in the, as you know, in the 90s too. Maybe it was the 80s for the girls, 90s for the boys. I get my decades mixed up. I'm getting old. And won a couple championships there, which was at the Agrodome, which was, great memories and great runs. And the combination of Richie and Don, you kind of didn't know how that was going to work out, but it just meshed perfectly. Don's got great strengths and Richie's strengths, and they just matched well. And myself, I would just fill in wherever I needed to help out to keep it going. And it was a great run, a couple championships in a row, and then we lose in the first round the next year, going for the three-peat. And that was a lot of fun. So I coached the boys program for a while, and then I ended up, my last 4 years, I coached, I haven't coached in a few years now, but I coached at Charles Best, the girls program there. My daughter was there, was going into play, and they asked me if I wanted to coach the girls program there. And so I took that on for 4 years, and yeah, we had a good run there. So that was fun. We took that program from not being a program to making the provincials the last 2 years and doing okay.
Yeah, no, it was a good run for sure. One of the cool things in your time at Basketball BC is you got to see some of the transcendent players to our province come through the program, from Steve Nash to Kelly Olynyk to Rob Sacre. We've had some big time players come through. Give us a little bit of a rundown of some of the things that might have happened while those guys were through, or some of the things that have happened since, seeing these guys take off to the next level as they've done great.
Yeah, and on the women's side, we had some really good, like Michelle Hendrys of the world, Andrew Schneider's, all the great people over at UVic too. I mean, Kathy Shields' programs at UVic were dominant in the CIS at the time, or the CIU back then. Simon Fraser and Allison, she was doing, a lot of those kids came through our programs. And at UBC, when Deb got there, she was starting to pick up kids from the programs too. So the women's programs did really well also. I remember it was always a controversy when you had university coaches coaching in the program, because the other ones would all be like, oh, they're getting an advantage. They're getting an advantage of getting to know the players. And I also thought, yeah, well, that could be good or bad. They might not like you. They might not like the coach. So coach may not play them enough, and they may not like them. So those were interesting times. Yes, but we said that great female players, and women's national team had lots of BC content on it, as did the national team with, Steve coming up, Nash obviously is the big one. I remember him and Rich Goulet coaching him in the Western Canada Championships up in Salmon Arm Gym. And it was a good team. And I think the final, they played Alberta in the final, and Salmon Arm Gym's packed, and there's Steve and a couple of his buddies from SMU playing, and a really good team. And its final was like 110, 103, and they're just getting up and down the floor. And then Steve goes on and plays with the junior national team for a year, I think. But then Ken Shields coaching the national team, and he saw Steve right away, and he brings him up to the national team as a 17-year-old or 18-year-old. And I remember we're playing in the Canada games in '93 up in Kamloops, and Steve's on the national team. And we want Steve to come back and play for BC, obviously, and everybody does. And then I'm negotiating with Ken Shields on releasing Steve for a week. Can it be a week? Can it be 10 days? How long is it going to take? Come on, Ken. Come on. It's good for everybody. And Steve comes back and plays and does a great job. Unfortunately, I think the team finished third, but Ontario that year didn't win it. They finished second, but they had a team they had 5 guys. The 5 guys who started all had D1 offers, and it was Greg Newton, who went to Duke. Pete Van Elswick went to Stanford. Greg Francis went to somewhere back east, Fairfield, I think. Peter Garachi was on the team. Their starting 5 was like 7 foot, 6'10", 6'11", and 2 great guards, and we just couldn't get past that. But Steve did a great job, and we continued when he supported Steve Nash Youth Basketball and all the great stuff he's done in the community. Then you got Kelly comes along, and he's in the program, and late bloomer breaks his leg in grade 11, I think, playing football, quarterback, 6'7" quarterback. That probably is something to see. And he comes along and he does some great things. You got Rob Sacre, and I'm sure I'm missing a whole bunch of people. There was a lot of good players. You're right. That at the time, that's where people went to get the good competition and to be a player and get the good coaching and to get recognized. We'd go down and play in the States, and we were one of the few teams that went down, a few avenues for you to go and play in the States at the time. And things have evolved since then, and they were good times.
Absolutely. So just real briefly, you obviously now you work at the Chamber of Commerce. Give us a little rundown on what it's like to make the switch from basketball all day to having a real job now. What's it like, kind of, fundamentally trying to help people grow their businesses?
It's a shorter commute, I'll tell you that. My commute's like 4 minutes down the hill. So when I was working in Richmond, I was living in Coquitlam. Heck, when I was when we started Basketball BC and we were at 1367 West Broadway, I was living in Coquitlam and would drive down there, and then I'd go coach at Fraser Valley in the evening.
Jeez.
So I'd drive all the way out to Abbotsford and coached and come home and repeat the next day. So I'm doing this triangle for 2 years. That's probably that's one of the reasons. I also had my first daughter at the time, and I just said, I can't do this commute anymore. And then Sandy Chambers took over, and they had a great run. A lot of the kids that Bruce and I had recruited ended up being stalwarts. Like, we were loaded for the next year, and I just said, I can't do this. My job is now I became ED. So so I worked for Basketball BC for like 18 years, and then took a year off and took care of some family issues going on with my in-laws who happened to pass away during that time up in Seychelles. So it was timely. It was good that way. And got a job as the CEO of the Tri-Cities Chamber of Commerce here in Coquitlam, and Port Moody. So I'm in my hometown, helping people get better in their businesses, working with politicians all the time. We had 2 ministers on a Zoom call yesterday answering questions. There's a lot of similarities between the two. I'm a membership-based organization. Basketball BC was some membership. You're servicing your community to make them better. That's what I'm doing. So there's a lot of crossover, and I'm really enjoying it. There is life after basketball, which is I've been preaching that to a few coaches who have been going forever, and I said, you know what? It's funny. I think some of them with COVID and they're not coaching, they're kind of discovering there's other things to do out there than just coach. And I'm kind of preaching that to a couple of my friends in it and going like, yeah, you know what? This is good to get out and, see what other things you can do in life.
Yeah.
So it's been great. I love my job. I love my community. I've got it. And it's like building a team. I've got a great team here. And it's like when I was at Basketball BC, people would come work and then they'd move on to the next thing because that's the way the progression worked. You got Paul Sharenza, who went on and is now at Southridge. He worked there. And we had a few other people, Mike Morgan, Mike McNeil worked with us for a while. There's other people too. It's the same thing here. I hire young, very talented people, and they do a great job. And some of them stay for a couple or 3 years, or maybe longer. Some of them do it for a couple of years, then they move on to the next thing. But if I enhance their skill set that they can move on, that's a good thing. If I can do it while helping businesses, that's my goal.
In the last little bit, I've actually had an epiphany the last couple of days. Having employees in your office, they're kind of like your assistant coaches. And when they go, and if they were to go get another job, it might not be as good, but they get to find out for themselves. You know what I mean? And so it's your job to train them. If you don't train them, they might stay and suck. So you got to train them. You got to make them better. And if they leave, they leave, and hopefully they can go achieve good things. But the goal is obviously to do everything you can to make it a great environment so that they never want to go anywhere. But listen, thank you so much, Mike, for coming out. I think your story is important for people to hear. We're gonna get this out there, and I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Anthony. Thanks for thinking of an old guy like me. I appreciate that. And hey, thanks for all the work you're doing in the basketball community. And you were a disruptor, and I think it was good.
I remember when you let me join the elite committee. I was talking trash in a couple emails. You're like, why don't you go on the elite committee? I'm like, maybe I will. And you're like, oh, come on.
I think the sport has to evolve, and it's evolved in such a way. And I'm not in it all the time now. I'm on the periphery, but I do follow it. But it had to evolve, and sometimes that evolution's tough, right? And there's hard lessons, and especially if you don't want to evolve. And we're always evolving here at the chamber. We're like, I don't want to be your dad's chamber. And I keep telling my staff that. They're like, I don't want to be the old man's chamber. I want to be new, what's fresh. And I tried to do that with Basketball BC too. And I think a lot of things we did, and I hopefully that's, and sometimes that transition's tough to get everybody on board, and the game is where it is now, and hopefully we can get everybody together on this, working together to grow the game and get kids better and get better opportunities for them to get better. So
absolutely. Well, thanks so much, Mike. We'll talk to you soon. All right.
Thanks. You take care. Bye-bye.